Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith on the line from Dallas, Dave Anderson via North Dakota. And then we have Ilja Semjonovs, Latvia, but via Orlando. And then on the other side of the world, thank you for joining us, Robert Davis from South Carolina, but what a global background. 35 years of experience. I've got down here technical director, national coach, a few of the countries listed, Peru, Panama, Thailand, Singapore. We can ask you about the GPTCA, president of several countries, again, listed a few, Japan, Colombia, Indonesia, Pakistan. Written several books, articles, coaching on the tour. Robert, thanks for being our guest.
Well, thank you. What an honor to be on here after listening to the podcast. I feel like I know you guys already.
Where to begin? I'll throw it off on a loop. Tell us about training German Shepherds.
Well, it started just before COVID. I live on a rural farm in southern Cambodia, and I got the first few for security. And then one of the males got over the gate, and next thing you know, we had puppies. And then we had a contact with the canine and the coach and the police, and we started breeding. And they would send their instructors down to train the German Shepherds. And so I got involved in that, and it's just a real education and a lot of fun.
So who's smarter, German Shepherds or junior tennis players?
I would say German Shepherds over pro players for sure. So I don't know. They're a lot easier. You know, those electric collars we use for problem alpha males, we could use on a few tennis players.
Now, I know we have a hard stop. You've got to practice to run in Bangkok. You're in Bangkok right now, right?
That's correct. They're the first challengers of the year here. So I've got an American Taiwanese that you know, and he knows you, Jason Zhang. He played at Michigan.
Yeah, classy guy. Same age as my son, Connor. I know they're buddies. And I know Dave has a hard stop. He wants to watch Ashton Kruger, somebody he's worked with for nearly a decade when she was coming up. But one thing, let's have this be part one. I haven't finished the book. I got it, I think, the day before Christmas. I appreciate you sending me. This is not your first book, Elements of Coaching Professional Tennis. It's your second book. Is that right?
It's the second one. I wrote the first one on a tennis player that I coached for 22 years. Sam Qureshi. Lessons learned from the tennis tour. And we just finished another book, It Takes Two, How the Game of Doubles Imitates Life. We got that title from Kasparov's chess book. And then the next one that's coming out in a couple of months is Empowering the Tennis Parent. I try to encourage tennis parents to get involved and educated simultaneously.
Sounds like we should have a 10-part series of these podcasts. But take us back to take us back to South Carolina. Where did tennis? How did tennis begin for Robert Davis?
Yeah, well, I tell you, I was blessed, guys. I grew up in a tiny town with no traffic lights, and I didn't pick up tennis till I was about 12 at a public park. And the man who started me was what you might call a hack. He was an old man who just loved children, and he hacked at tennis balls. But you know, when you're a kid and you don't care if someone, shows an interest in you. We used to ride our bikes to the park and wait for him to finish his day job as a bricklayer, and he'd come out and hack tennis balls, and he just loved us. And we didn't care that he didn't know how to, you don't know what tennis is supposed to be. And that led to the next important person, who was a really good junior coach, Ray Frazier, who did once again, someone who just took an interest in teenage boys who needed a older brother or someone who would spend time with us off the court. And I'm forever grateful to Ray Frazier for that care factor. And then that led to Coach Chuck Creasy at Clemson, who became like a father figure to me and a mentor. So I was blessed to have those three men. And then Creasy thought that I needed to expand a little bit, and he introduced me to Dennis Vandermeer, who agreed to take me as an apprentice. The best 6 months of free work I ever did. the greatest investment.
Oh, that's great. And then tell us, I mean, with your progression, traveling all over the world, why don't you touch upon that? I mean, how did you go from those humble beginnings to being on the tour and such?
Ignorance. I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to be. You know, one of the great things about growing up in America at that time was we had all those self-belief books. You probably remember, 7 Habits of Highly Effective. Well, I grew up thinking that you could be anything you wanted to be if you worked hard enough. And obviously, Coach Creasy and Dennis Vandermeer believed in those principles. And sometimes you get opportunities that you're not qualified for, but you get it. And then it's up to you to. And so Vandermeer helped me get to Peru. They didn't realize that I was so young and couldn't speak Spanish, because back then it was all fax machine and things got messed up. So I wasn't qualified for that job, but I got it. And the same with being on the ATP. Thanks again to Dennis Vandermeer, I got my first job on the ATP quite young, and I wasn't qualified for that. And I didn't really know anything. I was just happy to be there. So one thing leads to another.
Your book, you just list so many different coaches. I mean, I shouldn't say list. You mentioned so many stories. You've already mentioned Chuck Creasy. I mean, if you were to pick out some coaches to talk about you on the tour, some of the stories from your book.
Well, there's, one of the misconceptions, Steve and Dave and Ilja, is that Bob Brett told me this, and it was so valuable. Bob was sort of like a second mentor when I got on the tour, and he said it's not always the best coaches on the ATP and WTA tour. Yes, some are the highest in our profession, but not everyone. And so the point being, stay humble and keep trying to learn, to observe, to watch, to ask questions. So with that in mind, there are coaches like Paul Annacone. He was young. He was still playing actually when I started, but he was always someone who learned and observed. Craig Boynton was another coach who spent a lot of time as an apprentice before he got his break. Scott McCain out in Austin was a wonderful teacher. He was always teaching pros first, training pros second. And I used to watch his practices and just come away feeling like, wow, I've got a long way to go.
Tell us about GPTCA. So a lot of letters. What's it stand for? And
I'm not sure the names, but how that started was coaches. No disrespect to some of the other organizations like ITF and their courses, but coaching pro tennis players is not so much about a rigid one size fits all. It's more people management. You'd be surprised with people. We spend more time off the court with players than on the court, definitely at tournaments. And so the GPTCA, Tony Nadal and Rainer Schutler and Dirk Horton and Castellani, a few of us got together and decided, why don't we try to share stories and philosophies and case studies? Because most of the coach education on the tour is done in locker rooms, cafes, and that's where you really hear some incredible stories. And you also realize that you don't have any magic. You don't have coaches aren't as smart as they often think when you hear that there are many ways to get there.
That's a good start. I really appreciate having you on as a guest. But let's go around the horn. Dave, go with a question for Robert.
Yeah, Robert, tell us a little bit about, I'm a big fanatic when it comes to pushing the sport of doubles. I know your background with it. I feel like at every stage of the game right now, doubles is not only under attack, but it's on the ground on its last breath. And, so we're trying to save it and bring it to life. So any thoughts on that, on what you're feeling out on the tour with doubles?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave. That's one that's near to my heart. I even have a book called Doubles Inc. one of the highlights and great honors of my career was getting to spend a month with Bob and Mike Bryan during the preseason of 2015. We were collaborating on the book, on their biography. It didn't, for a couple of reasons, nothing to do with them. It didn't get off the ground, but I learned so much from being being with Wayne. And first of all, doubles, there are ways to approach it, but I believe that you have to be a tennis player first and a doubles player second. And if you've ever watched Bob and Mike practice, well, first of all, they were very good singles players all through juniors, college at Stanford, but they practiced tennis first, and then they would do some situational doubles second. But the big thing is doubles makes your singles better. That's what I would tell junior players and parents and coaches. That I could give you the best example from last year's Jordan Thompson from Australia. Max, we could go on. And if you look at the players coming out of the U.S. college who are successful on the ATP and even some on the WTA, they have a good, solid, all-court game thanks to doubles. And then if you do your research, I tell parents and coaches, Dave, don't take my word for it. Nobody cares what I know. Do your own research. And then look at the way the game is being played today versus 6 or 7 years. Look at how many players are approaching off the baseline who are coming in, and who have competent, solid volleys. And where's the best practice for that is doubles. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Go ahead, Ilja.
A follow up from this question. What would be the myth, some myth in doubles, myth busting doubles that you would like to erase forever?
Yeah, well, the double specialist, Coach Ilja, that's my favorite. That's a great question. Thank you. There's a lot of people say they label you, and labels can be libels. They're very good. Right now, the coach who's the most successful doubles coach is out of Britain, Louis Caillé, a Canadian. And many people just call him a double specialist coach, but he was actually the Davis Cup captain in Canada. He was a very good tennis coach before he hit those home runs in doubles. And I've also heard that, you have to be able to coach the sport of tennis in all phases, but your players or you might find more success in doubles. But that doesn't mean that, you're less of a coach than someone else. Many of my players towards the end of their singles career got a second life through doubles, but Jason Jung is an example. He got to about maybe 120 in singles, which is really good. And through injuries and different things, and he's extending. The same with quite a few other players. So most of you've got to be a good tennis player.
Your list, I thought we could do a shout out. I'd like to get back online. When I interview people, I know Dave and Ilja would feel the same way. As I don't want to pretend that I've read your book cover to cover, but I just got it at the beginning of the holidays. But a shout out. What comes to your mind when you think of Pat Cash?
Well, he's obviously one of my favorite coaches to point to because he sort of ticks all the boxes. There were two players in the early 80s who started the entourage, if you want to call it that name, or the teams, Yvonne Lindell and Pat Cash. Cash was the first one. So he was obviously a great player. He did a great job with Philippoussis and Rosetsky before he went to help some of the girls and then guys. But Pat is one of the great students of the game. Many people don't realize that. He's always studying something, whether it's on the biomechanics, the physiology, the mental. He uses a lot of analytics. And then he believes in bringing in other experts who are smarter than him in areas. But finally, what Pat has is great EQ skills. He knows how to manage himself, others, and on the team, and he's always trying to make people on the team, the player, the physio, the fitness, help them to get better. And then lastly, Steve, is because he commentates, he's constantly watching tennis. And so he doesn't take a day off from watching some form of tennis.
Oh, no, thanks for that answer. Go ahead, Dave.
I just did a little background too. Like Steve, I haven't had time yet to delve into your book completely. But there was a quote of the greatest doubles team in history. Who were you referring to in that?
Player or team?
Team.
Well, obviously Bob and Mike are considered the greatest team in, the Woodies, and then many people say John McEnroe was the greatest player. That's subjective, but if we just look at the greatest team, it's Bob and Mike. And so part of the research for this book I've got called Doubles Incorporated is how doubles, legends, the super teams, and then the greatest team in history, Bob and Mike. I'm sorry, I forgot what the question was, but that's sort of where I was headed.
Where did Daniel Nestor factor in your research?
Well, Daniel Nestor is, he was, remember, a very good tennis player. Had some, and Danny Nestor, just like many of these guys who got between like 30 and 70, maybe, he had great instincts. But, one of the things we joke, Danny, about is he was the first doubles player to start the chop and change. And him and Mark Knowles were number one in the world, and doesn't really matter who did what or what. But I think Danny said that his biggest mistake was splitting when they were number one in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob and Mike made a very interesting, humble comment that they're not sure that they would have won as many titles had the best team stuck together. And that's kind of them. That shows their humility. But that's what happens on the doubles tour. Players start pointing the finger at their partner when they start maybe having a tough, and they think Bob Brett used to laugh. Bob Brett said, the problem with every doubles player is he thinks he's better than his partner. And that is so true, except for the great teams.
Well, that's interesting.
Well said, yeah.
With doubles, the lefty-righty, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it definitely can help, especially on both the return and the serve. And yes, obviously you had the Woodies, Bob and Mike, McEnroe and Fleming, and Fleming, had the great comment that, the greatest team is McEnroe and anybody, so it definitely helps. I think today, more than that is you've got to have a plan in doubles. And it's not that there's a right or wrong, because Louis Caillet's system for England works for them. The Jeff Coetzee from South Africa, who got the Colombians, they're different, but you've got to have a plan, and you've got to get both players to buy into the plan, train the plan, and then evaluate the matches. And so that is really the hard part, and that's got nothing to do with volleys, or it's more about, can you get two players committed to being on the same page.
Yeah, I always think of Shriver and Navratilova, that lefty-righty, Newcomb, Roach. There's just so many of them. Go ahead, Ilja.
Yeah, this is kind of big picture question. If you would restart tennis from zero tomorrow, what would you keep and what would you redesign?
Do you mean from the juniors or at the top?
Yeah, from the bottom. Like, we'll start tennis from zero tomorrow. What would we keep and what would you would like to redesign?
Well, I would say big picture. A lot of the points that I think you mentioned on your podcast that Wayne Bryan brought up about keeping the smaller tournaments. I don't remember the names of all the junior tournaments but I feel like, just my opinion, I'm not saying I'm right, but we got too many of this, super tournaments, and parents are always playing up and worried about numbers and rankings, and taking players to national centers rather than letting a coach so that's sort of the bigger picture. I don't know if that answers your question, Ilja, but maybe in a tactical thing, more all court tennis. So they have to develop, approaches, underspin, forehand, slice, backhands, volleys, all of these things. But at the end, I think if we talk about the U.S., just a little bit too much of one association trying to dictate. That's not what made American tennis great. And if you do your research around the world, why is Italy number one in the world right now? Well, they gave tennis back to the clubs. The federation put it back in the hands of the club. And a lot of those Italians have had very few coaches. So coaches that started them carried on with them. And then if you study, the greatest model probably is Sweden. How did Sweden become so good in the 70s and 80s? And there's a wonderful book on that written by two Brits. And they highlight the volunteer tennis teachers at the youngest age who were competent and the great coaching education. So we have many case studies. Argentina focuses on competition first and technique second. So I'm not saying that I agree with that, but they're quite successful models that we could learn from.
Oh, that's really well put. Here's somebody else who's on your list. Certainly some of these people I have go way back. I've met them in one capacity or the other. Not that I know them that well, but Doug McCurdy, I mean, he really helped me when I was running this program at Tyler Junior College, and he was with the ITF, first based at the Queen's Club, and remember his office was at Wimbledon. But give a shout out to Doug.
Yeah. Doug is probably underrated for the impact he's had on global tennis. He did an apprentice with Vandermeer as well, but Doug is an excellent tennis teacher. He many of the people that you've talked about on your podcast, he has talked about, and he's recommended the same books. Ed Faulkner, I think you brought out his name. Doug is one of the great students of tennis, and what he did when he took I believe it was Philip Chatrier, who was the president of the ITF, asked him to create the ITF Department of Development, and then Doug created the ITF Worldwide Workshop. So all of those manuals, and then Doug's assistant, who came from Lander College in South Carolina, was an Irishman, Dave Miley. And together they traveled the world teaching tennis in remote places. And a lot like Vandermeer, they believed in trying to, there's a lot of third world countries and developing countries that needed a system. So that was a great impact. And Doug was also the first. He's always helping people. And so Doug and I, for a while, we were on the phone once a week or at least once every 2 weeks talking tennis. And so just like you guys do, he really believes in honoring those great titans of tennis teaching and coaching.
Oh, that's a great answer. Thanks. It's great to hear this. Laughs from the past. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Coach, I have a young man here that is doing a blend. His name is Jaime Polgar Garcia. He says he met you in Thailand many years ago, a few years ago.
Okay, Jaime Polgar Garcia. What country is he from? I know he's Spanish.
He's a Spaniard, and he's done a lot of coaching, traveled with a lot of different few name pros like Mackenzie McDonald, et cetera. But we were talking about it. He has a dual role right now. He works inside of our academy program, but then he is leaving this evening to go out on the road for 2 weeks with Micah Braswell, who is, and in talking to him about it, and if you could elaborate on this, the volatility of that type of work out there, being that you're at the mercy of the person's emotions somewhat as to whether you have a job. And so you see that kind of being a base coach in combination with travel. Do you see that as a very common thing for people that are in his position? He's a 36-year-old, navigating it all and loves both ends of it. But how does that unfold for the majority of the people?
Well, Dave, I could talk for the rest of the time. I could put you guys to sleep with that question. That is such an important thing for coaches. One coach from Sweden, he told me a wonderful thing that I don't know if he meant it to me personally or if he was saying it in general, but he said, on the tour, you get a job to do a job, not to keep a job. And so the point being, when you're on the tour, a lot of times the lifestyle is so intoxicating that you just, you end up wanting to keep that job, and you end up pacifying your player rather than telling him what he needs or she needs to hear. You often tell them what they want to hear, because it can be a dream job. One week you're in Rio, the next week you're in Rome. You go, it's like, and so you have to be careful. But I can tell you from my experience, the worst thing that can happen to a young coach is that you get opportunities you're not ready for. And I don't mean feeding balls or talking tactics. I mean maturity level. And one of the drawbacks to coaching on the tour is you don't have accountability. We need, and I'm speaking to myself, we need people above us that also say, like, hey, I think you might want to reconsider what you're doing off the court, or, careful with I'll give you an example from my own, and I'm embarrassed about it, but Bob Brett told me years ago at the U.S. Open, we were practicing, and you know how the kids line up around those show courts there, and I had a little bit of profanity back then, and Bob came up and put his arm around me, and he said, that there are kids watching and their parents. I think you could say something a little bit differently. And I was embarrassed and hurt, but I'm so thankful that I had someone that cared enough to tell me that. And you don't get that as a young coach if you're not careful. You think and you need those, you need guidelines, you need accountability and mentors, or otherwise you don't do your best.
I love your answers. This is great. Go ahead, Ilja.
Yeah, but the question would be about patience and process. Just especially coaching on the tour, there will be some setbacks before you're going to have any results. What would be your advice to navigate the coach to stay with a longer process to see a result? And I'm sure it's more stressful even on the tours and the juniors. So what would be your...
Well, that's another good question. And it's happened to me a few times. When I started with Assam Qureshi, 2001, he was about 220 in singles ATP, and a few months later he was down to 500. He didn't defend from the year before for whatever reason. He lost, and so But I believe if you have a good communication with the parents and the player, and you spend time trying to educate them on that the process comes first, and sometimes you get quick results, and sometimes you don't. And if you have good people, Ilja, they normally understand. The problem is when you go in with all this fire and enthusiasm, and let me tell you something I've learned the hard way. Confidence does not mean competence. We coaches can make mistakes. I've made my share of scheduling. I've had players that I pushed to do this tournament or this schedule, and when we probably should have taken a break and gone back to the training block. So you also have to be able to admit you made a mistake. But the biggest thing is the communication, where you're trying to educate both the player and the parent. And if they buy into your process, you're okay. But if they just hire you because of personality or charisma, or because of something you did with a former player, you're in trouble.
Yeah, Robert, I think I might write that on the bathroom wall. Confidence is not competence.
Well, unfortunately, as American, when I was young, I thought I knew everything. I mean, I didn't know what was wrong with the rest of the coaches, why they didn't think like me. So you come out later. Nothing humbles you like being, in competition every week. Like the great football coach Lou Holtz said, one day you're drinking the wine, the next day you're picking the grapes. And man, have I been humbled in this sport.
Yeah, and I can just elaborate on all these names you're mentioning. Here's another name, Dusan Vemic. You speak highly of him.
Yes, yes. He's another one. You find sometimes when there are players out there that you just think, man, this guy's strange. And if you ever saw Dusan Vemic play tennis, you think, what in the world is he doing? Is that karate or is that tennis? And he would throw it. He was the greatest at drop shots before Alcaraz. He would drop shot, lob, hack forehand, rush the net. What we didn't know back then was that Dusan was self-taught, but he had a very high tennis IQ. So he was always watching players, probably more than he practiced. And he was a great tactician as a player. And what happened was in Serbia, he knew Novak when Novak was 11 and 12, and he was the big brother. But why I like Dusan so much is he paid his dues. He was really, along with Marin Vaja, just as responsible for a lot of Novak's success in the coaching, but he never took the credit. He was always in the background behind the curtains. But if you ask Novak, who gave you the strategy and tactics for much of your career, it would be Dusan. But after paying his dues and spending so much time in the background, he had some girls on the WTA. And then Bob and Mike hired him at the end of their career. And Dusan is a very quiet person, and he only speaks when it's really necessary. And you'll find, whether it's Bob and Mike or Novak, players hang on his every word. And so I have tremendous respect for Dusan.
That's a great answer. That's intriguing. He's intriguing. Go ahead, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
I had the opportunity through Steve to spend a lot of time around it. Again, I'm going to come back to doubles. Great doubles player in Robert Seguso. What comes to your mind when you think of Seguso and Flack?
Well, I tell you, I reached out, and I know unfortunately has gone to heaven. But the point is, they were one of the great super teams, and they were out of SIU Edwardsville. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they learned doubles, but I think they were also pretty good singles players. But they just played doubles with great teamwork. And one of the things, if you go back and study the doubles from the 70s and 80s and early 90s, is you normally didn't win with a big serve. It helped, but you had to have great servers partner, receivers partner. Doubles points were 4, 5, sometimes 6 shots. It's beautiful to watch today. And I have those guys. You guys probably remember their Davis Cup, all those big matches they played.
Yeah, Robbie was amazing. I've known him since he was 10. Go ahead, Ilja.
Yeah, just going off your book and here as well too. Just what would be the listeners would be more shocked to learn from what you learned on the Pro Tour? I mean, something shocking that people just don't know.
Well, gosh, that's a question I could probably write about 10 things down. Well, one, there's a few great books. One is called Hidden Potential by Adam Grant, The Talent Code. There was a little informal research done in the locker room a couple of years ago. I think it was in Shanghai or Beijing among the coaches. And I guess it would apply to the WTA as well. It's not the best or most talented players who are in the top 100. It's the players who have good skills but have better work ethics and who take tennis seriously. And so, but alternatively, from 100 to 200, a lot of the coaches feel that they're often better tennis players, what you might call talented, at the lower ranks than there are in the top 100, because they don't take it seriously. They don't do their homework. They don't take care of their nutrition, all of these things, and they don't have the work ethic. And when we say work ethic, we don't just mean on court whacking balls. We mean deliberate training, deliberate with your nutrition, your stretching, your recovery, having plans, sticking with plans. Max Mirnyi, who's there in Florida, who's probably the greatest professional who played tennis. In fact, all of the top players gave him a standing ovation when he retired, not for his achievements, but the way he achieved it.
Could you elaborate upon that? What do you mean, how he achieved it?
Well, he was a professional in every sense. So, for example, Max Mirnyi, he never needed supplements because he never ate anything that was not really good for his body. So remember, he came out of the Soviet Union, Belarus, before the breakup. So his father didn't know how to play tennis, but he knew sports, volleyball. Whether Max would win in the fifth set at Wimbledon dramatically or lose in the fifth set, he would always follow his routines. He never got too excited or too down. His routines are what gave him the career. He never really had an injury because he had such good planning. So I remember him telling me, and his father seconded, that he never missed a training block because of injury, because he put so much effort into taking care of his body, knowing when to stop, but he also planned, which is what to go back to your question, what most people don't realize, that a lot of guys who get into the, let's say, top 500, they do it by winging it. They don't have short-term, mid-term, long-term plans. They don't use KPIs. They don't self-evaluate. It's all on feeling. Oh, I feel good, so I must be doing good. Or, oh no, I've got to defend points. Let me go on the other side of the world and to Tbilisi, Georgia, and try to win that future because it looks like it'll be weaker. Mm-hmm. But the best players, the Misha Yuznis, the Mikhail, the Max Mirnyis, have plans, and they're very mature at a young age, and so when they get money, they don't blow it. They're able to manage it because they know that they're winning right now, but they may not be later. And so those are the little things that have nothing to do with forehands and backhands, and that's what it's like to be a professional.
Mm-hmm. With Max Mirnyi, so many things would be going on at Nick Bollettieri's, and he sometimes would just be on a court by himself with a ball machine. Yeah, all these names. There's so many stories within stories. I know you've got to get to the court and practice, but let me ask one more question. I find that a lot of touring pros, opposed to the teaching pro, more secure. They're happier in their own skin, and with what we've put together, studying tennis teachers from the past, and we find a lot of tennis teaching pros are very critical. They certainly don't do a deep dive, or I don't think they would be critical. What are your thoughts on that? The knowledge base of the touring pro on our level, the grassroots teaching juniors versus our fellow teaching pros. And I guess with that, like, how did you find the GreatBase and how you connected to what we do?
Well, I tell you what, that's a question that I'll go over my time if it's okay, because that's probably the best question if I could share with touring pros as well as teaching pros. First, I found the GreatBase because I was seeking great teachers. And I somehow, whether it was YouTube or your podcast, or I'm not sure exactly the first contact, but you were honoring the Vic Braden, the Vandermeer Welby's wall. It might have been one of those. And then there was a little thing that you put out on being a master craftsman, a blacksmith, or something. I don't remember exactly which one. And that really hit a nerve with me, Steve, because I learned from Vandermeer and Creasy, and Vandermeer was while he was often credited with being one of the great teachers of tennis, what people don't realize, he was one of the greatest students along with Vic Braden and others. And so that's the first thing, is that what we see in coaching courses, or we see today, is a lot of coaches wear the coach hat. But my goodness, but you get it because a friend gave you a credential, and there's nothing wrong with that, provided you treat it as a vocation, which I believe you have said in your podcast a few times. Unfortunately, on the tour, a lot of coaches treat it as a vacation, not a vocation. So we find that they know drills, they know how to work players out, but they don't know how to get players to the last 20% because they don't study communication or they don't study technique things. They don't do the analytics and study all of these things. Whereas the teaching pro normally has a better understanding of fundamentals, or I think you've got building blocks. Is that correct on GreatBase?
Mm-hmm.
So what? In the old days, when I grew up, it was teaching pro first, and then maybe a college coach, and then maybe if you were one of the chosen, you get to be on the pro tour. Today, anybody could. We've got girlfriends who got coaching credentials that don't even know what end of the racket to hold. So there's been a cheapening of that. But what I would say to anybody, and it's not age specific. We've had great examples of older coaches who paid their dues at the clubs and who came on the tour late. And then we have the opposite, is do your research, learn this game, I'll give you an example. You can read Jimmy Connor's book, The Outsiders, whether you like his personality or dislike it. There's so many golden nuggets in that book that you can apply. Pete Sampras' book, read, study. And if you don't have a tennis study plan every week, well, then you're not doing your job as a touring pro. I try to watch at least one match a week of singles and doubles, and then I always go back and watch how match points are saved or lost. And then you've got to read. And are you studying how to communicate? Are you studying, all of these soft psychological tools? If you're not doing that, well, you're not doing your job. And that's my opinion, but based on observing the great coaches.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, you have to get to practice. Tell us a little bit about what you got going for practice today, then we'll let you go.
Yep. Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm very fortunate. I have two older players who are focusing on doubles, and they are the pro. We've got a big Airbnb apartment. They're cooking for each other. They do their stretching. They've been up at 6:30 stretching. They've put the right fuel, but we have a plan. So every evening we write the plan for the next day. We do a lot of Bob and Mike Bryan drills, volley drills. Then we have deliberate training, which means we'll serve to a specific zone. And then we're working on returns. And then we will also mix in regular tennis player training, 2-on-1 or cross-court down the lines from the baseline. After that, we come back and then we spend about 30 minutes of a classroom every day. So we connect to tennis TV. We might be focusing on server's partner, or we might be focusing on the teams that have the best defense. They're good offensive teams in doubles, and they're great defensive teams that make you miss. And Bob and Mike Bryan are a wonderful example. If you watch their lobs and how they never beat themselves with errors. So we go through that. We try to spend at least 30 minutes a day in the classroom. If there's not a match that they have played, we'll study players in the top 10, and then we will evaluate each other, myself included. And so it's not easy, Steve, to get, sometimes as the coach, you think that you're always right. But when the players say, well, we saw you texting, while we were getting water, and it's good for me. It's good to have that feedback. It keeps us all on our toes. And then I have other rules that I got from Harry Hopman. We have to run for every ball, Steve. I don't care. If you're going to play pro tennis, you can't let balls bounce twice, because if you research the really important points, look at Sinner Alcaraz, or look at Love 30 at Wimbledon when Sinner was trying to hold his, he was up a break, and then you've got to scramble. And finally, whatever you do in practice, good or bad, will be exposed under pressure in a match. If you practice with great habits, you run for balls, you don't waste shots, you keep the water breaks to 90 seconds, which is a rule I have with my pro players. And if you do that, you'll be fine in the match. You may not win every time, but you'll be in good position to win. So that's how we evaluate after.
No, that's a fantastic answer. As we say with these podcasts, we hope our listeners have a tennis treasure chest, and you certainly have given us all many golden nuggets. But I'll stay in touch, and we'll do this again. Any closing comment, Dave?
Well, yeah, Robert, thank you. I know you have to run. Two things, in spending a few minutes with you, intellectual curiosity and passion. And I think those are just so evident, and I appreciate your time. It's been awesome. Look forward to it again.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Go ahead, Ilja.
Yes, Robert, thank you. Just it was an honor to be on the podcast and with you, Steve and Dave. Always great to hear and collect as me as a young coach. Just keep getting more and more information and collect the nuggets. As Dave would say, pick up all the gems on the court. There was a lot of gems on this table on the podcast if you're watching this video.
Yeah.
So
thank
you.
Go ahead, Robert.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate that. I just need to let you know, none of that is my own. I got that from watching others. But I also want to shout out, I came to the GreatBase because I was seeking good teachers. And I believe that whether you're a touring pro or a teaching pro, if you love your job, you'll gravitate towards good teachers. And when I went through those building blocks and pillars, it really brought to my attention how much better I can be doing teaching. Like I remember one, you had the young kid in a looked like a clubhouse hitting shadow strokes off cones maybe, and working on that. But that was yours, Steve. But there was a lady who did that at Spartak Club, very similar, 30, 40 years ago. And so those are just great teaching tools that coaches, we need to go back and find the great teachers. And I think the GreatBase is probably the premier tennis teaching. And I've recommended it. And I'm not just saying that because I believe that you guys have mastered teaching tennis, and I'm thankful for it.
Oh, no. Thank you so much for the kind words. And let's do this again. And as Rafa Nadal says, I hope this is your best practice.
Thank you, guys. It was an honor.
All right, we'll do it again. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, have a good night. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, listeners.
Thank you.
Dave and Ilja, we're back on. Follow up our conversation with Robert Davis. I have to do that again. Like what you said, Dave. Wow, what comes to your mind? Let's review that short session.
Well, I think at the words I used at the very end, it really was a wow kind of 45 minutes. The guy's just sharp, and you can just tell he's got that humble, curious mind that's just always learning, and that's so cool to see. And it's a great example. Passionate. My favorite quotes he threw in: confidence doesn't necessarily equal competence. To me, that's so true. And then how many people on the tour as coaches treat it like a vacation, not a vocation. But I think that's not just out on the tour. I think that even at the club level. But wow, yeah, I'll say wow again because it was just a great learning session for everybody, I think.
Certainly been called some bad things in my day by some people, but I was always flattered when Uncle Vic Braden called me the observer's observer. You can learn so much by just watching people. I find that so many junior tennis players, they don't even watch other junior tennis players. You're watching kids play, and today we had a situation like that on the court. Two college players that one previously played here at University of Ave Maria, Florida, and got a young kid and going, gee, aren't you just going to look over there and check out how they hit the ball? Because next thing you know, we're going to have you playing them. But just oblivious to that. But yeah, open your eyes and how's the expression go? Children close their ears to advice and open their eyes to example. But you learn so much by just watching practice. Obviously, you want to watch and hear what's going on. But go ahead, Ilja. What do you got?
No, it was, again, this great podcast. Again, gems everywhere for coaches, for parents, for students. This 45 minutes when, he's talking about, what separates, when he was talking about Max Mirnyi, what separates, the professional players and what's, there are so much more talented players on the bottom of the ranking list versus who really makes it and why Max Mirnyi was so appreciated. It's such a motivational lines, what you put out there for juniors just to listen to it and just to take it in that treasure. It's a work ethic, just finding the things on your own, and for parents as well. It's just what motivates you. And I think that's a great story. So that's going to motivate you. Not those results. Results will come, but it's like that what wins. I thought that was very humbling, and the same as a coach for me too. It's just like just work ethic. How did he say? Opportunity finds you, but if you have a work ethic, you're good.
Yeah, even like we said, it's not the players with the best skills; it's players with the best work ethic. Off the court, GPTCA. I'd be very humble about that, but I think just sharing stories and experiences that he doesn't really say that okay, they're the best for nuts and bolts and X's and O's, but I've always said, let me correct myself, I haven't always said that. The backstory is really what's quite interesting. How to become really good. Now, you mentioned Daniel Nestor. I think of Nestor, perhaps the humble, classy Stefan Edberg. I'm not sure how the story goes that he was on a long flight back from Australia, but he lost a Davis Cup match to the young, I think 19-year-old Nestor playing singles. You mentioned Jeff Coetzee, who spent time with you, Dave, and myself back when he was a kid, East Texas. What you said about the Swedes, I actually went to Sweden back in the 80s. I have the book he referred to. I have to dig it out in my library, but where the Swedes trained, they called them animators, 10,000 volunteer coaches. Like back in the day, I don't think I really even played baseball, but I did play baseball. I remember asking my mother, can I not play baseball this summer, just work on my hockey skills in the driveway? And she's told me, no, you'll play baseball. It's un-American not to play baseball. The baseball player in the States, and it was back in the day, it wasn't fair for girls, but if you were fielding balls, you knew in the infield, you had to get your body in front of the ball. But I think the Swedes, certainly it was not really the mystery of Borg. Borg was such a phenomena, but then when Wilander in 82, I guess they had 6 guys in the top 10. They certainly haven't sustained it over the years, Swedish tennis. But let's go around the horn another time, Dave. What comes to your mind with Robert?
Well, I love his devotion to and his pushing of doubles. I'd love to hear more stories. Qureshi, who he was with, obviously had a lengthy career in it. That was one thing that really, I love hearing people that love doubles. I think a great quote about Mirnyi that I think every parent, player, coach could take away from that, and it may not be verbatim, but his routines made his career. And, we're always pushing people to have on and off court routines. And that's probably one of the most difficult things, really, to get people to have sound routines and then to stay with them. And when he said that about Mirnyi, his routines made his career. I had known the history of Mirnyi a little bit just through studying it and his dedication, but I think that was just so well put.
Go ahead, Ilja.
Yeah, English is my third language, so I like that line, what he used. I had to Google it, what it is. I didn't know that word. But he said on the tour, pros are on a vacation, and when you're in the trenches, you're in a vocation. So I had to go on Google, look it up, what it is. So vocation, is a calling or a profession, work you feel drawn to, often involving purpose, service, or a long-term commitment. It's long-term, purpose-driven, and vacation is vacation. That came up when Steve asked Robert about that difference between what's the difference between pro on the tour, coaches on the tour, and the trenches. So that was great. So just
I had over the years sit down and talk to touring pros. I was one time with Brandon Flanagan, and he said to me afterwards, he goes, "Do you realize that all those ATP pros were listening to you?" And but I think it's the teaching pro that many times is threatened, not open to learning. It really shouldn't be that way. We make those narrated slow motion analysis, and the macho male ego. We've had better success when we make a narrated slow motion analysis, and we give the hour long tape, or I should say, the parent of the junior player gives the tape to the coach. We've had more success with the female coach basically saying, okay, these guys are right that tennis is a rectangle. These guys are right that water doesn't run uphill, it runs downhill.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that was so much fun. Change gears, Dave, you're getting ready to watch Ashlyn Kruger. Where is she? And if she's down under, what's going on with her? Who's she playing tonight?
Well, she one of the Chinese players that she actually Zhang that she ran into 2 years ago in the U.S. Open first round. It was a really lopsided kind of match. At that point, Ashlyn hadn't won a main draw match in a slam, so that was the first time she did that. She came back, she lost 6-0, then 1-6, and won the second set, 6-1 rather, and then 7-5 in the third. Went on to beat Andreeva a round or two later there, and she plays that young lady tonight again, and that girl's ranking's fallen a little bit out, and excited to watch her. She came back just briefly on the court to after being in Boca doing her off season with she's traveling with Hugo Armando, and body looked extremely fit and strong, and had done a lot of physical work, it looked like. So just anxious to watch, excited to watch tennis in general. I love when it kicked on the other night at the United Cup, and couldn't wait to turn the TV on and watch some live tennis for 26.
She's still young. How old is Ashlyn Kruger?
21. Turns 22 in early May. Yeah, very young, and just growing every day. I think definitely a challenging world to navigate at a young age, and I think that she's handled it pretty well and getting better at handling it. Each week that passes by. So hoping she can put her entire game together, play all over the court, and show everybody kind of how well she can do all of those things.
Speaking of doubles, who's she playing doubles with in Australia?
Gosh, I drew a blank there. I know she's playing with Schneider after Australia, and then she's playing with, I'll think of it here in a moment.
And how is she doing in doubles? I mean, what's her highest ranking in singles? What's her highest ranking in doubles?
Doubles, I think she has been right around the top 50. She and Sloane Stevens won, Charleston. She's done, reasonably well. I don't think maybe she's gone at it with the same intensity and purpose as the singles ranking. I think that singles, she's been as high as 29. I think that she could certainly use the doubles to build the singles, and I think it could really not only help it, but it might be a missing link to it if it was, especially the doubles that she kind of grew up playing for many, many years, where she really went forward well.
Now, for our listeners, I remember being in Dallas and when she was very, very young, and watching her, talking to her mom was with her most of the time back in the day, right? So, but yeah, the cone, the drop hitting in the alley, the shadow swinging, all the routines, you can see it in her game. She definitely has the skill to play all over the court. Why don't we do this? Ilja, why don't you ask Dave a question and we'll wrap it up at Robert Davis. That was great.
Yeah.
Any questions on Dave with what he's looking for when he watches that match tonight?
Yeah, well, like my comment was, every time I hear, Kruger's name, it just like comes up a video of her like on the cone working with you. It's, just a little video. I mean, it's what an amazing story, and story continues, and the greatest tennis players, they never arrive. They're always in transition to a better place. Does she have a cone in your bag? It's in your hotel room.
The cone, own the cone. In baseball, we're always saying, the tee. I loved it when I read where Manny Ramirez, the baseball player, played for the Red Sox. He probably played for more than one team, but he used to travel with a tee. The tennis, the baseball player, they'll hit off the tee. Of course, I know, Dave, you visited that place in Tampa. We were there 15 years, right by where the Yankees play spring baseball. Yeah. And I mean,
I was going to go try out for the Yankees.
We literally could look through the fence, and it's just amazing to, a lot of times, the Derek Jeters, the big time players, they might have not been there the whole month of March, but no, they're world-class players. The ball's on a tee and they got a swing coach. But then the game comes around, they're in the on-deck circle and, taking those imaginary cuts at the ball.
I think golfers do such a better job of it, obviously. For my grandson's birthday, we were over they have these like top golf hitting bays at the club now where, they have the screen and you can play all the games. But they had golf camp going on, and we've got some really, really good golf teachers. Obviously, Jordan Spieth came out of the club here and was coached by Joey Anders, who is a friend of mine here, but I watched 3 of these guys go to work on the young golfers, and I mean the teaching. Number one, they had teaching aids, and they were actively using them. They were running stations, and the kids, the attention to detail that every young golfer had compared to typical tennis players. It was really interesting to me. It made me realize we got to do a better job, not only in our profession, but we in terms of the coaches at our club. Just taking the time to set up simple cones sometimes is forgotten. But these guys really, hats off to them. They're doing a great job in the golf program over there, and I think golfers get it a lot more.
Oh, I'm always telling people I have a golfer's mentality. Quick story. Ivan Osirets, who puts the podcast together, I was with him one time, and a gentleman wanted to show us a golf course, beautiful place, actually up in the mountains, Wintergreen. So, the gentleman told Ivan, "Yeah, you jump in the second golf cart." And I rode in the first golf cart. And Ivan, he not only not been in a golf cart, he'd never swung a golf club. But another time, I said to Ivan, I said, "Okay, let's check this out." And I think all tennis people, tennis parents, juniors, I said, we watch the Golf Channel. He's a top 10 player in the world, and they're there, their stance, and it's just grip, swing, body. And, golfers, of course, the scoring system, say if 72 is par, I mean, some kids, especially in the early age groups, they can have a 72-ball rally. But if you don't hit the ball the right way, it's going in the woods, it's going in the water. You're playing against the course, too. That's another thing. In tennis, the old thing, Crummy's playing crummier.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know that they're crummy because they beat crummier with the golf swing. But Australian Open, how many tune-ups before that? Last question.
Yeah, there's Brisbane, and then one tournament after that in, is it Adelaide? That'll be it.
29 in the world. That's amazing achievement. But she's certainly capable with her size and her skill set to take it up. But, I've heard people say many things. It's a long ways from 29 to 19, and even further from 19 to 9. And when you get to that level,
if she gets through this round, she'd play Rabak in the next round. So it'd be another good match. And
then with the juniors, I know she won the national 18s in the Orange Bowl, both twice each. Is that right?
18 nationals, singles and doubles, and then 16 and 18 Orange Bowl. So won it back to back as a 16, and then in first year 18. Andreescu, I think, was the last player to do that. And then U.S. Open junior doubles as well, playing with Robin Montgomery.
No, that's great. Well, listeners, thanks. Ilja, thanks. Dave, thanks. And most importantly, our guest, Robert Davis. That was, as you would say, Dave, wow, amazing session.
Yeah, that was incredible.
Another podcast in the books. Listeners, thanks for listening. Adios, amigos. Good night,
Adios.
everybody.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.